So Africa has, in a sense, missed the first opportunity, and this is the thing I said in East Africa, that in East Africa we should have become united before we became independent,
As the first president of Tanzania, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere was more than a leader. He was Africa's philosopher king. He was a father figure, a guiding light in the darkness of the struggle for freedom from the shackles of colonization. From helping Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Mozambique in the fight for independence to overthrowing Uganda's Idi Amin Dada, Nyerere etched his name in history as one of the greatest African leaders. Nyerere adopted the name Baba wa Taifa, which is Kiswahili for father of the nation, which shows the respect Tanzanians had for him and the role he played in Tanganyika's fight for liberation. To this intellectual pan-Africanist, the quest for a united Africa was a lifetime undertaking and commitment, the lifeline for the emancipation and development of African people. So what was Mwalimu Ali's life like, and what were his ideals? Born on April 13, 1922, Julius Nyerere emerged as a beacon of hope during a pivotal time in Tanzanian history. Growing up under British colonial rule, Nyerere witnessed firsthand the injustices faced by his people. These experiences ignite a fire within him, committing his life to the cause of social justice and education without pause. Born in Butiama in northern Tanzania, which is the eastern shore of Lake Victoria, to a local Zanaki chief called Nyerere Burito, Julius Nyerere was known by the Swahili name Mwalimu, or teacher, because of his profession before becoming active in politics. Mwalimu Nyerere studied in Tabora Boys Government Secondary School and then received a scholarship to attend Makerere University, that is in Uganda, where he obtained a teaching diploma. He returned to Tanganyika and worked for 3 years at St. Mary's Secondary School in Tabora and then proceeded to attend the University of Edinburgh. During his stay abroad, he associated very closely with George Padmore, the West Indian Pan-Africanist who had been Kwame Nkrumah's mentor. Upon returning to Tanganyika, Nyerere took a position teaching history, English and Kiswahili at St. Francis College near Dar es Salaam. It was at St. Francis College that Mwalimu founded the Tanganyika African National Union, which is TANU. This is a national party that effectively ended the British rule in Tanganyika. The family was central to Mwalimu Nyerere. He married Maria Magige in 1953. They had 5 sons and 2 daughters. Then in 1961, the wave of African liberation hit the shores of Dar es Salaam, and after decades of political prison, Tanzanians regained freedom. Nyerere became the first prime minister on December the 9th, 1961. A year later, he was elected the president of Tanganyika, which soon became a republic. Mwalimu was instrumental in the union between the islands of Zanzibar and the mainland Tanganyika to form Tanzania after a 1964 coup in Zanzibar which toppled Jamish bin Abdullah, which is the Sultan of Zanzibar at the time. By the way, check out the details of the Zanzibar revolution in my earlier episode on the Arab slave trade. Well, now let's comb Nyerere's socialist ideals and the impacts of the day-to-day lives of Tanzanians. You see, Nyerere's vision was crystal clear: to uplift his nation from the chains of poverty, exploitation, and inequality. Under Nyerere, literacy and healthcare surpassed anything most African countries have ever achieved. He also battled with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, over the issue of third world debt, something that we Kenyans know all about given the recent 2024 incredible demonstrations. We all know that debt to the IMF is practically neocolonialism. Nyerere also created a genuine national entity out of a hodgepodge of some 120 ethnic groups. When you recognize that so many of the surrounding nations are riven by horrendous ethnic and tribal divisions, what Nyerere accomplished seems almost miraculous. Besides, compared to some of other African nations who have struggled with peace, Tanzania is an emblem of unity, particularly given the over 120 nations in the country. The 1960s marked a defining moment in Tanzania's history as she gained independence. One of Nyerere's most emotionally charged endeavors was the concept of ujamaa, which means familyhood in Kiswahili. Ujamaa was meant to dismantle endemic dependence on Euro-American economic and political ideologies. Establishing closer ties with China, Nyerere was adamant that it wasn't just an economic or social policy. It was a manifestation of his deep empathy for the rural masses. For example, the 160 kilometers Tazara Railway, nicknamed the Great Uhuru Railway, was no small feat. In 1967, Tanzania and Zambia joined hands with China to build a railway snaking through Tanzania's diverse landscape, from sea level to almost 6,000 feet. Tens of thousands of Chinese and African workers collaborated to build bridges, tunnels, and lay tracks. The Tazara Railway provided Zambia, a landlocked country, with much-needed access to the Tanzanian port of Dar es Salaam. Then on April 26, 1964, Nyerere negotiated a union with the newly independent Zanzibar and became the president of the newly formed country of Tanzania. Ujamaa philosophy aimed to build a society based on communal ownership, collective responsibility, and equitable distribution of resources. He believed that in these traditional villages, the state of Ujamaa had existed before the arrival of the imperialists. Through Ujamaa villages and cooperative farming, Nyerere sought to empower Tanzanian citizens, enabling them to break free from the shackles of poverty. Perhaps, this approach not only aimed to improve the economy, but also fostered a sense of unity and national pride. Nyerere willingly announced that he would retire after the presidential elections in 1985. So, what about Nyerere's foreign policy? In the international arena, Nyerere stood as a beacon of non-alignment during the Cold War. As the flames of oppression raged across southern Africa, Nyerere's heart resonated with the cries for the liberation of Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Mozambique. Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe and Mozambique's Samora Machel found refuge and camaraderie within Tanzania's borders during the fight for the freedom of the African peoples. Nyerere didn't merely offer physical shelter, he provided a safe space for strategizing, ideation, and emotional rekindling. In an emotionally charged display of solidarity, he offered military training and logistical support to both Zimbabwean and Mozambican liberation forces. Through diplomatic channels, impassioned speeches, and his moral authority, he brought their struggles to the forefront of global consciousness. China and Russia are some of the countries that responded to Nyerere's diplomatic appeals. Meanwhile, please like and subscribe for more content on African history, culture, and geopolitics. So, what about Nyerere's successes, challenges, and legacy? Education was another realm where Nyerere poured his heart and soul. By making education the foundation of Tanzania, schools sprouted like hopeful blossoms across the nation, nurturing generations with knowledge and aspirations. He believed that education was the foundation upon which a prosperous nation could be built. Nyerere championed a bold initiative, free and compulsory education for all. This wasn't just a policy, it was a declaration that every Tanzanian child deserved a chance to dream and to be emotionally unburdened by the chains of ignorance. He carried out mass literacy campaigns and instituted universal education. When you visit Tanzania today, the older generation sings tunes of Kambarage Nyerere's impressive achievements. Also, Nyerere will forever be remembered for pushing and spearheading the growth of Kiswahili in East and Central Africa, which epitomized his belief that Kiswahili could promote African unity. And for sure, Africans need this cultural awakening to avoid the over-reliance on imperialist colonial languages. What about the land policies? Nyerere's emotional connection to his people extended to his land reform policies as well. He believed that every Tanzanian had the emotional right to own a piece of their motherland. His policies distributed land from large estates to individual farmers, instilling a sense of pride and ownership. The emotional impact was profound. Families could cultivate their destinies, the sweat of their brows, nourishing both the soil and their dreams. Perhaps, Nyerere's emotional investment in social justice was the most stirring of his servant leadership traits. The Swahili proverb, mnyonge mnyongeni, lakini haki yake mpeeni, perfectly summarizes Mwalimu's policies. He recognized the integral role that women played in society and championed their rights. His policies aimed to dismantle traditional barriers and provide equal opportunities for women to contribute to the nation's progress emotionally, intellectually, and economically. It is impossible to speak about Pan-Africanism without mentoring Nyerere. Alongside Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, Mwalimu was one of the African leaders during the Pan-African movement that swept the continent in the 1960s. He was larger than life, a seemingly incorruptible individual, and a committed Pan-Africanist. He not only pioneered the founding of the Organization of African Unity in 1963, but also participated in African liberation movements. In one of his 1966 speeches, he expressed his displeasure that Africans have inherited nonsensical boundaries that have become fruitful sources of disagreement. In retrospect, the presence of artificial boundaries in Africa must lose their significance to improve military cooperation, communication, and the free movement of goods and people. Nyerere supported anti-apartheid movements in South Africa through the ANC, the African National Congress of South Africa, and Frelimo of Mozambique when it sought to overthrow Portuguese rule in Mozambique. It didn't stop there though. Robert Mugabe's ZANLA, Zimbabwe's ruling party during independence, owed their gratitude to Mwalimu Nyerere for facilitating the expulsion of the British from Southern Rhodesia, which is present-day Zimbabwe. In this final part, let me tell you a story about how Mwalimu Nyerere outmaneuvered Idi Amin Dada, the self-proclaimed lord of all beasts of the earth and fishes of the sea and conqueror of the British Empire in Africa, unquote. So, in October 1978, Idi Amin Dada, the dictatorial president of Uganda, invaded Tanzania and declared the annexation of all territory north of the Kagera River. Ugandan forces, armed to the teeth and fueled by Idi Amin's insatiable thirst for power, stealthily crossed into Tanzanian territory under the cover of darkness. In one of the most audacious wars in East African history, Mwalimu Nyerere mobilized the 20,000-strong Tanzanian People's Defense Forces in collaboration with Yoweri Museveni's exiled forces. The Tanzanian-Ugandan War reached its climax along the banks of River Kagera in western Tanzania, threatening to destabilize the whole of East Africa. In no time, Tanzania retaliated by capturing Kagera and then pushed forward into the interior of Uganda, seizing the capital Kampala by 1979. Seeing the writing on the wall, Idi Amin Dada fled Uganda and sought refuge in Libya. Outside Tanzania, Julius Nyerere was the chairman of a group of 5 frontline African presidents who advocated for the overthrow of white supremacy in Rhodesia, South Africa, Southwest Africa, which is present-day Namibia. On his last high-profile actions, Nyerere mediated in the Burundi conflict in 1996. African leaders both present and future must learn from his modest lifestyle, added to his moral authority. He was untainted by scandals or by charges of corruption. On October 14, 1999, Nyerere inevitably went to be with the ancestors. He died of leukemia in a London hospital. Today, Nyerere's legacy lives on. His vision of socialism laid the foundation for modern Tanzania, influencing education, healthcare, and rural development. We are reminded that well-strategized socialism beats capitalism any day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more insightful explorations into African history and culture. Until next time guys, kwaheri.